Dear friends, welcome to my channel. I'm Berezovets. Today I want to discuss with you the key events in international and military life that occurred just before the weekend and during the weekend itself. The focus is primarily on a high-profile interview given by Florida Congressman, future National Security Advisor to President Trump, Mike Waltz. He gave a lengthy interview, ABC News, in which he revealed the current state of Russian-American relations. Russian-American relations, and in particular, he talked about the stage of preparation for a phone call between the future American president and the Russian dictator, and we see here the symmetrical actions that the Kremlin immediately takes. It is there. This concept in political science and political technologies is called mirroring, meaning literally. The Kremlin mirrors all the statements that come from Trump himself or his representatives. Thus, this technique is most often used in their usual practice. The Kremlin mirrors all the statements that come from Trump himself or his representatives. Thus, this technique is most often used in their usual practice. Journalists, political consultants, and intelligence agencies. So, technique. The mirroring is primarily aimed at establishing personal contact and control over the subjects. Naturally, these actions, they clearly show us the nature of the special operations, psychological nature, first of all, which Putin and his entourage carry out in relation to the team and the future president of the United States. They do this eagerly, as they say, with enthusiasm and desire, since what's at stake is not just the establishment of relations and contacts between Moscow and Washington. What's at stake is, in fact, the future of Russia without any exaggeration. What's at stake is, to be honest, the future of Russia without any exaggeration. And here all possible allowed and forbidden methods come into play, and they are being thrown out instead of a platform. We're hearing about Serbia. President Vucic has already stated that he is ready to become a platform for negotiations regarding Ukraine. I said that there would be more and more such platforms. You can see for yourself that my prediction came true. Let me remind you earlier, in Europe, possible venues mentioned include Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia, which was added just over the weekend, Switzerland, and now also Serbia. And believe me, this list is far from exhaustive. And we haven't even started listing the platforms that exist in other regions. In particular, Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, and so on and so forth. Meanwhile, another important event took place the day before. The Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation accused the armed forces of Ukraine of attempting to strike a compressor station of the pipeline using drones. Turkish Stream. This station has the symbolic name Russian and supplies gas through the Turkish Stream. This is the last pipeline through which gas is supplied from Russia to Europe. Naturally, through Turkey, this southern route that Russia managed to build in due time. In their plans, besides the Turkish Stream, there was also the idea of pumping gas through the northern streams. 2 gas pipelines were even built. In the end, only one line remains, one line that hasn't been damaged. The Northern Stream 2, while the Northern Stream 1 has been completely destroyed. And the Hungarian Foreign Ministry has already reacted to this, equating it. The attempt to attack Russia in Kuban is nothing less than a threat to Hungary's sovereignty. Next, a fake was thrown out over the weekend regarding Russia launched a Kinjal missile from a Su-34 carrier. Naturally, there is no confirmation of this information as of today. However, it has exposed serious problems that the occupiers are facing. Let me remind you, earlier the Kinjal, the air-launched ballistic missile was only launched from a MiG-31. And finally, a secret stash has been discovered with Putin, a secret military budget that amounts to $250 billion. So on average, that's $80 billion for each year of the war since the full-scale invasion. Well, let's start with the strike on the Russian compressor station, which is located in Kiev. In the Anapa district of the Krasnodar region, this is one of key stations as it supplies gas to the Turkish Stream, which then goes from Russia to European consumers. The gas supply to the Turkish Stream, which then goes from Russia to European consumers. Interestingly, the station is located in a rather difficult and remote area. Ione, this is a mountainous area about 5 kilometers from the coast, the Black Sea. As of 2020, there were 7 gas pumping units installed, each with a capacity of 32 megawatts. Everyone, according to official reports from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation, which we can trust to some extent, since they lie 99% of the time, they claim that on January 11th, an attempt was made. Trust a strike, since they lie 99% of the time, but nevertheless they claim that on January 11th, an attempt was made. An attempt to attack the Russian gas compressor station with 9 unmanned aerial vehicles. Naturally, all of them was shot down, stated the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation. However, when the debris from the drones fell, the equipment at the gas measuring station and the administrative building were damaged. At the same time, supposedly none of the employees at the gas compressor station were injured. From this, we can draw a few conclusions. First of all, Russians, right now, due to serious concerns about the strikes on Russian infrastructure facilities, primarily on oil refineries. I remind you that the BVS calculated that only in 2024, drone strikes were carried out on oil depots, oil refineries, 81 times. That means it's theirs. Basically, it's like shagreen leather that you keep pulling and pulling, but it starts to tear in all places. They are forced to spread out their air defense systems. However, this gas compressor station turned out to be so important for the occupiers that they covered it with a separate air defense system. An unprecedented case. You have to agree they don't have the resources to frequently secure their oil depots. And here, in this case, they covered this station with the help of air defense systems, suggest an attack. This station is crucial to risk military assets. Intelligence reports enemy boosting air defenses in Crimea. For them, this station is so important that they are willing to sacrifice more critical assets, including military ones. By the way, Ukrainian intelligence reported that the enemy is actively increasing their air defense systems in the annexed Crimea, including at the expense of the front and also at the expense of covering other Russian regions. This also indicates that it is critically important for the enemy. They are covering the southern direction. This shows a critical shortage of enemy air defense systems, which they will use to protect major facilities. And this indicates a critical shortage of air defense systems for the enemy, which they will try to use in the future to protect their largest military and infrastructure facilities. This is definitely news. Super positive. Well, of course, the main accusation, which suggests that Ukraine is trying to deliver a blow to Russia in this way, stop the transit of Russian gas, naturally by disrupting supplies to European consumers, including Slovakia, and I remind you, Hungary. And also, Ukraine is trying in every way to ensure that these problems affect Russia's relations with the still friendly European countries, with a number of European countries. And if you think that the statement from the Ministry of Defense of the Russian Federation has faded into oblivion, you are deeply mistaken. In essence, this pass that was given was immediately accepted, and not just anywhere, but in Budapest. Although I guess I've grown tired of being surprised by everything happening in Hungary and Slovakia, so in this case I'll just quote the statement from Peter Szijjártó. I remind you, head of the Hungarian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He stated that any actions that threaten the security of Hungary's energy supply are considered an infringement on Hungary's national sovereignty. He also stated that we expect the safety and operability of this transport route to be observed by everyone. I emphasize everyone. Energy supply security, the issue of sovereignty. Therefore, any actions that threaten the security of our energy supply must be regarded as an infringement on sovereignty. It's amazing. I would say it's simply a striking synchronized statement that we hear from Moscow, where they also stated that Kiev's attacks on the Turkish stream are a continuation of the lines of energy terrorism that Kiev adheres to. But of course, who benefits the most from all this? Naturally, the Americans, the beneficiaries, have gotten involved in all this action in the Kremlin. The US, which has significantly and consistently increased its liquefied gas supplies to European markets. The fact that the Americans have indeed increased their liquefied gas supplies to the European Union is absolutely true. And to be honest, That was the strategy. That's absolutely true for the European Union. And in fact, that was the strategy, Washington, and that was Brussels' strategy to reduce and minimize energy dependence on Russia. There's nothing new here. Peskov didn't say anything different this time, although he did say, in that rare instance, the truth. But the point is, I repeat once again, that both Moscow and Hungary are equally concerned. First and foremost, the security of the transit of Russian gas that goes through the Turkish stream. Isn't it strange, you must agree, that all these things, sounding simply in sync, differ literally between the Mitias and separate nouns lead us to a very sad one. Although the obvious thought about the extreme closeness of Moscow and Budapest positions is clear, let's not forget about the current Bratislava. By the way, today, a number of Slovak parliament members finally made it to Moscow, despite the twists and obstacles where they met with Speaker Volodina. In short, it was a strange gathering that we witnessed today in the Russian capital between the Russian dictatorial criminal regime, essentially the Nazi Kremlin regime, and representatives from one of the countries that is part of both the European Union and NATO. Well, I guess it's become, I'll say it again, I'm tired of being surprised. Now we probably just have to wait for some kind of visit from a parliamentary delegation from Hungary. Well, as they say, if you're going to party, then party hard. And not far from there is the Georgian dream, perhaps. Well, to be honest, they have nothing left to hide. By the way, today there was yet another wild incident. It's essentially domestic, but nonetheless it demonstrates the entire baseness and vile nature of the current government in Tbilisi. 3 deputies. Today, in one of the hotels in the United Arab Emirates, members of the ruling party Georgian Dream attacked and beat a Georgian citizen who allowed himself to call them traitors. He simply told them during breakfast in the common restaurant that they were traitors and expressed his feelings towards them. In response to this, 3 sitting members of the Georgian parliament attacked and beat a Georgian citizen, who managed to capture all of this on video, as did other guests at the hotel. And fortunately, this scandal definitely won't be able to be swept under the rug. Unfortunately, of course, there will be no legal consequences for these 3 degenerate Georgian deputies from the Georgian Dream. However, I think that in this case it's definitely impossible to avoid an international scandal, since they have already been interviewed by local representatives, police, and this whole story, I'll say it again, once again it might come as a shock to some, will show the true beastly snarl of the Georgian authorities, of Ivanishvili, and all the other Moscow degenerates and lackeys of this criminal regime. Meanwhile, Congressman from the USA, Congressman from Pullman, Florida, Mike Walt, whom Donald Trump has announced as the next presidential advisor on national security, he made a number of important statements. In particular, he stated that preparations for a phone call between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin are already underway. He stated that this could happen very soon. However, he refused to specify any concrete timelines. But the preparations are already ongoing. So I'm pointing out that it's already ongoing. So this means that it has already been happening for some time. From President Trump's perspective, you can't reach an agreement if you don't have relationships and dialogue with the other side. And we will definitely start it in the last months. He also stated that this meeting will take place. It's not just about the conversation, but the next step. After that, the next step will be their personal meeting. Will it be a bilateral meeting? And will the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, participate in it? Walt stated that a decision regarding this has not yet been made in Washington, and it will be decided, obviously based on the outcome of the phone call. I expect the call at least in the coming days of the week. This will be step number 1. Mike, Walt stated on ABC News. Recently, he has significantly ramped up his activity and has become one of the key newsmakers regarding Ukraine. In particular, he also stated his other high-profile statement about Ukraine. To reach an agreement with Russia, it's necessary to stabilize the front line, and for that, in turn, it's essential to change the law and start drafting men in Ukraine from the age of 18. Naturally, this argument primarily concerns the fact that Americans will tie the provision of new military aid packages to Ukraine to the pace of mobilization. New military aid packages to Ukraine to the piece of mobilization, the armed forces of Ukraine. However, the argument about the necessity of drafting 18-year-olds has a number of flaws. Yes, we often hear from our American friends, the draft of 18-year-olds has a number of flaws. Yes, we often hear from our American friends. The arguments are heavily based on the fact that 18-year-old Americans fought in Vietnam. The thing is, the current nature of the war and the mental and moral preparedness 18-year-olds versus older peers. Senior, 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 senior. Older comrades who are 24, 25, or 30 years old. This question actually, it won't stand up to any criticism without a clear argument. I'll repeat once more why the American Army drafted 18-year-olds all the time. I won't delve into the issues of the draft during the Vietnam War. They are widely covered in the press, in historiography, and in cinema. It is enough to look at such masterpieces like Apocalypse Now or Platoon or Full Metal Jacket to understand for oneself, actually, from which social backgrounds young Americans primarily came and how psychologically prepared they were. From which social backgrounds did young Americans primarily come and how psychologically prepared were they? And the brilliant American directors who made these films, Francis Ford Coppola and others, they revealed it perfectly. In fact, there's a mismatch. The age and social characteristics of American draftees are harsh, extremely harsh, and let's put it this way, to the bloody war, conflict in the war that took place on the land of Vietnam, and in which, to a large extent, American society experienced and shock, and they acquired a significant number of complexes which they only got rid of after a successful campaign. Desert Storm, which I remind you took place in 1991. Up until now, Americans have been haunted by what is known as the Vietnam Syndrome, and in many cases it still affects them today. And let's not forget also about the emergence of a new Afghan syndrome related to the withdrawal of American troops from Afghanistan. Already in the term, the current President, Joe Biden, however, the decision, I repeat, to withdraw American troops was made by the previous administration of the 45th President of the United States, Donald Trump. And, of course, the 20-year presence of Americans and their allies on Afghan soil could not leave American military personnel, especially professional American soldiers, unaffected. The most important thing, the results, as they call it, the defeat from the savages in slippers, as they often allowed themselves to be called derogatorily, representatives of the Taliban. Nevertheless, these savages in slippers with their Kalashnikovs managed to drive out and force them to leave the land of Afghanistan. The most powerful, the most prepared army in the world at the end of the 20th and beginning 21st century. These are the realities, unfortunately. So I repeat, this is a discussion about 18-year-olds. And this should lead to the end of the war in favor of Ukraine. They too many flaws. I'll say it again. This all doesn't fit within the scope of a separate blog. If you feel like it, you can leave your opinion under this video. We can discuss this separately with you. Well, of course, I'll repeat, according to all the canons of intelligence services, in response to this statement, Putin immediately mirrored it through his spokesperson, Dimitri Pesov, who stated what to say about the place and meeting of Putin and Trump. Naturally, it's premature. And he has already indicated that many countries are offering their services as places where contacts could hypothetically take place. In particular, he commented on the recent statements from representatives of Switzerland and Serbia. Well, as Peskov stated, having asked base with all the details, we are scrutinizing these interviews, meaning the interviews with Wolf, Trump, and other members of his entourage. We are tracking the interviews. But still, we can only talk about whether this is evidence of a change in rhetoric in a week or after the official appointments. We're talking about such a potential team, he emphasized. Peskov. So basically, the information came out today, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. It only tells us that we're being informed about 5% of what's really going on. And for now, we can only guess about the real state of affairs and the actual negotiation team that is already working. As they say in Ukraine, it's all just noise. And that's why the information we receive publicly gives us a very superficial understanding. although, to be honest, a tangible understanding that these negotiations are ongoing and are taking place in a closed format, are in the most active phase. As for the place and time of this meeting, I can assure you that all of this is being discussed and agreed upon. Naturally, no one will report on this, including security considerations. And again, the Kremlin is very afraid. They really want a meeting with Trump. They're really scared that this meeting could fall through if, of course, we start throwing things out there, more detailed insider information. But fortunately, we can't hide anything in today's world, partly because representatives of Trump's team, including him, are quite open in their communication with the media, much more openly than the representatives of the current outgoing Biden administration. So I'm sure that new leaks will be unavoidable in any case. And finally, another topic. Putin has been found to have a secret military budget amounting to $250 billion. The reserve is almost $83 billion a year. According to Craig Kennedy, this is an American investment banker. However, in the past, he was the vice chairman of the board of directors at Bank of America Merrill Lynch. He asked his colleague about the fact that this budget amounts to the $250 million was formed by Russian commercial banks, which thus financed enterprises of the Russian defense industry. And so this shadow budget has been uncovered. I'll say it again, this is just a small part of what we've been informed about, what we've been told. Finally, was another leak from Russia. There was an attempt to convince that they launched the air-launched ballistic missile Kinzhal from the military platform, carrier Su-34. However, there has been no confirmation of the combat use of the Su-34 at this time. And this primarily indicates that the opponent has problems, first of all, with qualified pilots who launch from the traditional carrier MiG-31K and possibly from other aircraft. So for this was thrown out. This fake was uncovered by the analysts of the Defense Express project. And one more piece of information that was reported by the analysts of Deep State, one of the most well-known and respected analytical military analytical projects, which is believed to be connected to the Ministry of Defense. Russian troops may, in the event of a failed offensive on Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region, reorient and begin an offensive further into the Dnipropetrovsk region towards the regional center of Dnipro because they can't advance there. They may reorient and begin an offensive further into the Dnipropetrovsk region towards the regional center of Dnipro. Analysts, as well as the British newspaper Financial Times, reported this, quoting a senior official from Ukrainian military intelligence, Andriy Chernyak, who stated that the occupiers will try to cut off all supplies to Pokrovsk. However, they understand that they will lose too many battles for Pokrov. So they decided to stick to a different strategy, approaching from the south to bypass it. This means that this offensive may change its vector and start developing towards Dnipro. However, I will repeat once more. This information comes from the analysts of ASINT. It is unofficial information, not from the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, so we hear it and perceive it. Here, but final verdict regarding this version. We will be able to make a conclusion, of course, later, when we have more information. Thank you, friends, for watching the video. Take care of yourselves, subscribe to the channel, like, share, comment on this video, and recommend it to your friends and acquaintances. Take care of yourselves. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the armed forces of Ukraine, glory to the Ukrainian special forces, glory to the Ukrainian territorial defense. Take care of yourselves. Once again, this was Major Taras Berezovets of the Ukrainian Army. See you next time. Bye-bye.